Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to another video. And today I'm going to be telling you all about my second novel. So first off, if you're new here, hi, my name's Katie Lumsden. I like books a lot. I like reading books, writing books, editing books, talking about books on the internet, wearing clothes with books on, and generally all the bookish things. So I'm a booktuber, I'm a freelance editor, and I also am an author. I write historical fiction, and my debut novel, The Secrets of Hartwood Hall, came out earlier this year. It looks like this in the UK and this in the US. It came out in February in the US and in March in the UK, and generally it's been a exciting year of becoming a published author, so that's been exciting. But today I want to tell you about my second novel, which is coming out next year, and I am very, very excited about. So I have spoken a little bit about my second novel on this channel before, but I spoke about it in a video that was kind of filled with other writing updates, and it was sort of buried in the middle, and I haven't given it its own video yet. So I thought today I would just introduce my second novel properly and give it a bit more space, because, like I said, I am very excited about it. So my second novel is called The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst, and it is, of course, set in the 19th century. It's set in 1841 in the fictional county of Wickenshire, and it is quite different from The Secrets of Hartwood Hall. It is very different from The Secrets of Hartwood Hall, which has actually been like massive fun. I really, really enjoy working on books that are very different. Obviously, it's still set in the 19th century, but the style and tone of the two books are very different. Where The Secrets of Hartwood Hall was gothic and full of mysteries, and a first-person narrative following a small cast of characters in quite a claustrophobic way, The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst is more of a comedy of manners, social drama set in a small Victorian town with lots of complicated family dynamics, romantic relationships, and social drama, and that has been massive fun to write. So I would say that like both The Secrets of Hartwood Hall and The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst are both kind of love letters to 19th century literature, but in very different ways, because The Secrets of Hartwood Hall is very much like a love letter to the Brontes, whereas The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst is much more heavily inspired by Elizabeth Gaskell, Anthony Trollope, and Jane Austen. The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst has a lot of characters, and it focuses around a few key families in the fictional county of Wickenshire. So let me introduce you to some of the key families. One very important family in the neighbourhood are the Wickfords, Lord and Lady Wickford and their two grown-up children. They live in a big grand house with a very grand moat, and they are very proud of their ancestry, proud to patronise all of their neighbours, and proud to think of themselves as the most important family in the neighbourhood. Then we also have the Eltons, Mr and Mrs Elton, and their daughter, 19-year-old Felicia Elton, who is, by all accounts, the embodiment of perfection. And the Eltons, while not a titled family, are a family who consider themselves of very great importance. They are long-standing members of the landed gentry, and they are very proud of this fact. And then we also have the Ashpoint family, who are new money, so they are looked upon with suspicion in the great county of Wickenshire. Mr Ashpoint is a wealthy brewer who has made a fortune from his business, and he lives with his children, including his eldest daughter, Amelia Ashpoint, who is 23 years old, and to Mr Ashpoint's great disappointment, shows no interest whatsoever in getting married. But of course, this book is entitled The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst, so there must be somebody called Hurst somewhere about. And indeed, within the county of Wickenshire, there is a young gentleman by the name of Mr Montgomery Hurst. Mr Montgomery Hurst of Radcliffe Park is a young, wealthy bachelor, and so all the key families of the neighbourhood expect him to marry one of their daughters, but his actual choice of bride ends up surprising everybody. And that is the plot of The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst. So The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst is a book that I've been working on for a long time. I first started working on it back in 2016, so by the time it comes out in 2024, it will have been 8 years in the making. And I think The Secrets of Hartwood Hall was about 4 years in the making, from starting writing to publications. So The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst has been a much longer process, and it has been a book I have been working on and off for a long time. It actually started out as a short story, and I feel like explaining the premise for the short story I wanted to write also helps explain the premise for the novel, because the idea that I had for the initial short story that became this book was to tell the story of Mr Montgomery Hurst and his wife, to tell the story of a couple through gossip. So you never see anything from Mr Hurst's perspective, you just learn about his life and his relationship relationships through the gossip of all the other characters and families around him. But then I started writing this story and I had so much fun with the characters and so many ideas for the characters that I thought, oh no, I think it needs to be a bit longer. Maybe it'll be a novella. And then suddenly it turned into an 120,000 word novel. In fact, I just got the page proofs for The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst for me to check for proofread corrections, and it's a chunky book. It'll probably be like 450 to 500 pages, and there are a lot of characters and a lot of perspectives and a lot of different subplots and plots interweaving in what I hope is a glorious Victorian way that is also massive fun for modern readers. That's what I hope anyway. I have absolutely loved working on The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst on and off for 8 years. It has been through many different iterations. Characters have been cut and been introduced, subplots have been cut and been introduced, twists and reveals have moved around, and characters have changed personalities, and so much has altered. I just feel like I've been working on this book for so long that I know all the characters really, really well, and that has meant that it's been such a fun process, and also that I'm like so fond of this book. Like, I feel like a lot of people, when they publish their debut novel, feel very anxious about how people are going to react to it, because they feel like they've really like poured their soul into that book. You know, that's the culmination of all their writing for many, many years. And I didn't really feel like that with The Secrets of Hartwood Hall, because The Secrets of Hartwood Hall, while I loved it and I had massive fun writing it, I wrote it quite purposefully trying to write a book that was commercially viable, because I've been having trouble getting picked up with other novels in the past. And I love The Secrets of Hartwood Hall, but I don't feel like I poured my soul into it to the extent that I have poured my soul into The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst. Like, I'm so much more emotionally attached to The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst, and I have been for such a much longer time, that I'm slightly terrified of it going out into the world, but I'm also very, very excited because I love it, and I hope some of you will love it too. So The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst is coming out in summer 2024 in the UK, and I'll leave down below in the description some pre-order links if anybody is interested in pre-ordering it. That would obviously be very, very lovely. Pre-orders are really important, one, because all of your pre-order numbers count towards your sales figures in the first week, which means you have a much better chance of being sort of higher up in the book charts or anything like that. And also pre-orders tell booksellers that people are excited for your book, so the more pre-orders you get, the more likely a bookshop is to put books out in store as well. So if anybody does want to pre-order, that would be really, really lovely. Obviously it will be out come July. It will be out in ebook and audiobook as well, and hopefully it'll be in libraries too. Obviously I've just been speaking about pre-orders, and it would be very helpful for me if anyone would like to buy my book, but it's also massively helpful if you get my books out the library, you know, The Secrets of Hartwood Hall or The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst when it's out, because there's a great public lending rights system in the UK where whenever people take my books out the library, I get a small amount of money for that. So please do take my books out of the library as well. They're also released to help support me as an author. Unfortunately, I don't at the present moment have a US publisher for The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst. It is possible that at some point it might come out in the US in the future, but it's not going to come out in the US in 2024. So I know that a lot of people who watch this channel are based in the US or Canada. So if you are based in the US or Canada and you would like to read The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst when it comes out in the UK next year, then your best bet is probably to order it from Blackwell's, who I know do international shipping. And I know people in the US and Canada have said before that Blackwell's are really good for international shipping. If you're in other bits of the world, hopefully you might be able to get your hands on the UK edition. Certainly if you're in Australia, New Zealand, India, bits of Europe, you should be able to get the UK edition at some point when it's out. So I think that's mostly what I wanted to say today. I just kind of wanted to introduce you to the book because I'm really, really excited about it. There will be many more videos to come. I've got a cover reveal that will be coming up at some point in January or February probably. I've already seen the cover. It is beautiful. I love it a lot. At some point I'll do a video where I read the first chapter of The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst, as I did for The Secrets of Hartwood Hall, which now I'm saying that I feel like it's going to be interesting. Like, the first chapter of The Secrets of Hartwood Hall is mostly Margaret in a carriage on her own thinking, whereas The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst, There was so much dialogue and so many voices to do in the first chapter that that's going to be an interesting reading, but it'll be fun. I'll do a video about all the 19th century literature that inspired The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst. I'll probably do a video about my historical research for it, you know, how it changed from the short story I started writing in 2016 to what it is now, and many, many other things. Like I said, I am just very, very excited about The Trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst. I have been working on this book on and off for so long, and I love it so much, and I am really, really proud of it. So I hope this summer you want to read it, and I hope that you guys like it, and that is pretty much all for today. So thank you very much for watching. Do let me know any thoughts down in the comments, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.